So that's it. That's it. You got any questions for me?
No, I mean, I would have rather, I know y'all got policy or whatever, but I would have rather, have it contact, so, because it makes you look like you're on death row and all that.
They'll make sure that people don't know, that people know that you're not. But the gentleman that's going to be interviewing you, his name is Brandon.
Walker.
His photographer is John.
Okay.
Okay? Come on down here, we'll get you started.
Okay.
All right. Brandon, and pick up that receiver and ask him to make sure yours is working okay.
All right. Mr. Burks, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Mr. Walker.
Can
How
you
are
hear you okay?
Doing all right. Yeah, I can hear you clearly. Thanks again for your time.
Okay.
I really appreciate
Is
it.
this thing working pretty good?
Let's see.
12:40, you got until 1:40.
Okay. How's it sound? And he's getting set up, and then we'll see.
Throw a little more light on it.
Okay.
You guys been waiting pretty long?
No. I mean, there was a little line coming in, get the equipment checked and whatnot. But no, things moved quite quickly.
I look decent or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How are you?
19 years.
Yeah.
19 years.
I understand. Happy that we're finally able to get it done.
Right. Any idea on when it'll air?
That I don't know, because I have a few more interviews to gather, and to see where, in terms of, because it'll probably be, there's so many moving parts that it will probably be more than one installment. So we have to figure out like when that time would come to air. Do you want me to switch phones or?
No, I'm just trying to
Okay.
get in some glare.
So that's what we still have to figure out, but because in the nature of what we do, it'll be sooner rather than later, that's for sure.
Right.
Oh, Brandon?
Yep.
I think that's you I'm getting glare. Can you scoot back just a hair? Okay, that's not working. Try going that way.
I was hoping for a contact because this cage makes you look like you're on death row.
Yeah.
It's a
But,
little better.
maybe
I'm
we'll
seeing you
get
in
something
there.
Oh, I see it. What if I'm like over here?
Yeah, that's
If I
what-
just because I can see myself too.
Yeah, there's
There
not
we
much
go.
I can do about it. It's you. But yeah, I got it
I'm-
now. That's good.
I'm always the problem.
Okay, I think I'm ready.
All right, sir. We are rolling, and I do thank you for your time today.
Okay.
The first question, sir, I'm going to ask you is to just describe your day on June 30th of 1997. Where were you?
Well, I was in Louisiana, en route to my sister's wedding. A lot of this information didn't come out because of my attorneys, my past attorneys. They withheld a lot of information, practically abandoned me, on the case. So a lot of the evidence didn't come forth. But as things begin to unfold after the arrest of DEA agent Chad Scott, people begin to feel safe coming forward with, their knowledge of what happened. And the guy Scott, he's been doing this for, he's been terrorizing the minority community for the past 20 years. And they finally caught him, and a lot of people are relieved. From what I know, his first trial starts next week on the 19th of August. And I think he has another trial, federal trial, in October. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It's been hard on me and my family, but we're getting through it. I'm a soldier, so.
And I'm going to talk to you more in detail about Scott and those allegations in a bit. But June 30th, as you mentioned, you were en route to Louisiana. It was supposed to be a good day, right, for your family?
Yeah, it was. It was a good day. I stopped down in Louisiana in Lake Charles at the casino, did a little gambling, and traveled on to my hometown of Opelousas. My dad's whole side of the family is there. We brought forth the pictures, the photographs to show that this is where I was at this particular time. It's in evidence right now. The Harris County District Attorney is reviewing it. They're taking a pretty long time to review it, but I'm hopeful that Ms. Ogg and her administration will do the right thing. She's a very brilliant woman. She's, since she's came in, she's done a lot of good things for the community, and I'm hoping and praying, my family is hoping and praying that she does the right thing in this case, because, the federal government has indicted this guy on, Chad Scott, on 12, 13 counts, and, she should pay, the Harris County District Attorney should pay attention to that this guy is under indictment. With that being said.
Yeah, most certainly. You also made a phone call while you were there too, right?
Sure.
And that's...
we subpoenaed the phone records, but they never saw the light of day because my attorney at that time, Dick DeGuerin, he withdrew from the case. There was a lot of politics involved. The government was reviewing this case, and Mr. DeGuerin and I didn't see eye to eye on a few things, so he withdrew from the case. So the phone records, which he subpoenaed, they remained in his file, along with audio recordings of witnesses. None of this stuff was ever brought in my previous appeals because Mr. DeGuerin, I don't know if it was on purpose or what, but he kept it in his possession until my new attorney, Michael Wynn, was able to pry it up out of him. So now we have this before the court. They're reviewing it, and hopefully they'll make the right decision.
Okay. And now I want to ask you just about the circumstances that day where you say you were not.
Right.
Did you at all even know Early Perry?
No. Never seen the guy, never met him a day in my life.
So when you found out, how did you find out that you were a suspect in this case?
Well, I really didn't. I had heard about it when I got back in town about the shooting. It was near a club that I used to rent out and throw parties at, and when I found out about it, I really didn't pay no attention because that's the Fifth Ward. It's a kill. Back then, it was a killing every 2 or 3 killings every week, in that section of town. But I found out about it when I was arrested, maybe like 5 months later for it, and I told them then the only statement that I made to the homicide detectives was, "You got the wrong guy. I wasn't, I'm an everyday tax-paying citizen. I had never been arrested. Well, I had never been convicted of a felony. I was a licensed firearm carrier. FBI background checks, I passed it all, so it was really a shock to me. It was, it really destroyed my career as a record producer. And, but you hear these stories every day, it's all across the nation. It's just one of those things of people of color, especially young black men, but I'm vigilant, and I'm keeping my head up, and I know that the Lord is going to lead me to freedom.
And each of the witnesses who initially implicated you as having a role in this murder have since walked back their comments.
Exactly. Well, there was one. I think the guy's name was Scales.
Yeah, Kevin Scales. He was the initial.
Together.
Yeah.
We graduated from Barbara Jordan High School together,
Mm-hmm.
and we were back then we competed for the same girl, and he came and said something about I had something to do with it, and I think the family of Perry pressured him into fingering me. But once the community saw what was going on, he voluntarily contacted my lawyer at that time, which was Dan Gerson, and he went to Gerson's office and he signed an affidavit saying that he was drunk on that night, and he didn't, it wasn't me, and the case was dismissed. Now the case was originally in the 182nd court which dismissed it without prejudice, so they were able to bring it back. And 2 years later,
Grand jury indictment, right?
right,
Yeah.
it was a new indictment. 2 years later, these DEA agents who had it out for all of the black-owned record labels, they sought me out, and they brought some false witnesses to the table. I mean, they took these guys to the Harris County grand jury at gunpoint and made them say it was me. But since one of them been indicted, most of the witnesses have walked back their statements.
Why would they say it was you if it wasn't you?
I think it was pressure from the DEA. Those particular agents, they had a reputation for setting people up, killing unarmed citizens, and there's an ongoing investigation. As a matter of fact, on the day I was arrested, which would be May the 15th, 2000, they arrested me leaving my mother's home. And as I said, I was a licensed firearm carrier, and I had my firearm with me, and mysteriously it came up missing. It was never checked in the property. And on this same day, Agent Scott and one of the arresting officers went across town and shot and killed 2 guys. And my gun was never, so the FBI is investigating that as well. So, I mean, these guys, they were out of control. These agents, they were out of control. They were just, it's heartbreaking. It's frightening, and I'm glad that they've been taken off the street.
And certainly, so I want to back up for a second. You talked about, just ever so loosely, your life prior to this day. Talk to me about dollar bill records and where you were going with that, and where you had hoped to go.
Well, I started in 1992. One of the first groups I had was Insane Clan, and I had a group, Pluto, and a few more other acts. And we sold a few records, and right before my indictment, I had traveled to New York to discuss a multi-million-dollar distribution deal with Priority. And by the time I made it back, a couple of months later, it was over with, and the whole company crashed. I think Slim Thug ended up getting the artist that I had to deal with. One of them was my cousin, PJ, the rap hustler. He ended up going over with Slim Thug, and they took off. But originally, it was supposed to be me, and these agents, they ruined my career.
Now, there was an affiliation, right? You had just an affiliation with Rap-A-Lot Records, didn't you?
Sure. I mean, we grew up in the same neighborhood. He was a pretty good guy. They were always chasing him throughout his career. And that was their main target. So anything that was close to him, affiliated with him, they were trying to. Those agents, they were trying to bring it down.
And that's where I was going with this. So, as a matter of fact, Mr. Schumacher back in 2000 testified before Congress just on some of the work that he had been doing. And in that testimony, your case is brought up ever so loosely, at least. And part of that transcription goes, Mr. Schumacher, Lamar Burks was recently convicted of murder, and we had been told on several occasions by another informant that it was the informant's understanding that Prince had solicited Burks to murder key witnesses in this case. And then Mr. Burton replies that Prince had himself, according to your informant, this was secondhand information, had been involved. To that, Schumacher says yes.
Right. I mean, I read those hearings, and from what I understand, the lawmakers were saying that this is Elijah Cummings, as a matter of fact, out of Maryland. He said that this will be an ongoing investigation until we get to the bottom of it. So I think he stood by his word, and to this date, the investigation is still going, and they're slowly grabbing each one of these guys that were, that testified falsely before Congress.
Had you heard of Chad Scott and Jack Schumacher prior to your case?
Sure, I mean their names were in the street. You couldn't, especially in the hip hop community, they were known as killer agents. So if they crossed their path, you better watch out. Everybody was in fear of their life of these guys.
So was it a surprise to you at all that somehow they implicated you for something?
Well, it wasn't. It was shocking. It was kind of shocking that they would go to that length to force witnesses to testify falsely before a grand jury. When I found out that part about it, it was, I was like, wow, these guys will go to the limit to accomplish their goal.
Certainly. You were ultimately, a jury found you guilty.
Uh-huh.
Talk to me about that day.
Well, it was heartbreaking. My mother left the courtroom in tears. My dad, he stood with me to this day. He's currently in the hospital. They're not expecting him to make it too much longer. I was hoping to get out before he passes, but he's that day was it was a shock, man. But everybody got a path in life, and this was mine.
2 appeals, right, thus far?
Right.
And what do you think happened?
Well, the first one, I was represented, like I said, by Mr. DeGuerin, and he basically abandoned that appeal in the middle of the hearing. The second appeal was done pro se, which is, I did it on my own. I studied in the law library. I just kept the fight alive. So, according to statistics, only less than 5% of appeals are granted by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals each year. So you can imagine how that is without an attorney. So it's what it is. It's just, I'll just thank God that He's revealing what actually happened. He's bringing to light what these guys did, because you can look all across America right now, and you won't find a case like this where a DEA agent is under indictment and the federal government is overturning case after case after case. I mean, it was a double murder that Chad Scott framed the guy, and the government dropped that case, which is why I can't understand why Ms. Ogg administration hasn't moved more swiftly.
That was my next question. I mean, why then, if ultimately Chad Scott and the charges against him they speak for themselves, if ultimately there's such a link, why is it that there's been such a delay in getting you the justice you say you haven't received?
Well, there's two things that come to mind, and Ms. Ogg has appeared before the Commissioner's Court requesting additional funds. So I think that may be it. She doesn't have enough staff. That's one issue. The other issue is, that they don't like to admit when they're wrong. They're scared of liability. But I'm not after the money. She can keep her money. The county can keep their money. I'm not after that money. I just want my freedom to be with my family. That's how I feel today. They can keep their money. I don't want their money.
Can you discuss just the current casework thus far with your current attorney? I know that there are some matters that are underway right now in hoping to get a hearing for them to even argue the fact that there is this evidence on the table.
Well, justice is slow, and from what my attorney is telling me, the district attorney's office has not filed a response. We filed this appeal in November of last year, and they haven't even given an initial response. They haven't addressed any of the evidence, even though there's overwhelming evidence of innocence. To date, they have not addressed any issue that we brought. So I don't know what to say. I mean, you have to pose a couple of questions at Joshua Reese, Andrew Smith, and Miss Auger herself about the evidence that's on the table and why it hasn't been addressed.
What do you think?
Well, as I say, I think she's short. She's shorthanded. She doesn't have enough staff.
I'll just have you, we'll pivot for a second, because I mean, I think that we've pretty much discussed the matters of the initial case leading up to it, and some of the issues of late. I want to bring up Clayton Brown, who was your initial co-defendant, wasn't he?
Yes.
How did you know Clayton Brown?
Well, we grew up in the same neighborhood together. He's a couple of years younger than me, and he did some promotional work for the company, my company, Dollar Bill Records, over the years. And Clayton, he's a stand-up guy. He was kind of afraid of Scott. People were telling me that once Scott was arrested, he felt comfortable and coming out and telling what really happened and who the real shooters were that night. As you know, he was one of the shooters, and according to his latest statement, he's saying that Dervin Whitaker, assisted him in the shooting. So that was a bombshell.
And Whitaker himself was also the state's witness during your first trial, wasn't he?
Yes, the only witness.
Right.
The only witness, and which is which is illegal. The conviction is illegal. The Texas legislature passed a law that says you have to have 2 witnesses or 1 with corroborating evidence. The state they brought neither. They brought 1 witness out of prison with no corroborating evidence. The DEA traveled to, I think it was Colorado City, and they spoke with Whitaker, and they made some type of deal with him, and he became their informant. And they basically brought him out of prison, put him on the stand, and and I think they knew he was the killer, and they cut him a deal. They let him out of prison. So this is how ruthless these guys were. This is how bad they wanted me to become an informant.
That was my next question. For someone who may not be equipped or up to speed with this story and the case against you, and they may look at this and say, well, why Lamar Burks? Why would he be chosen as the person implicated in something that he didn't do if he didn't have anything to do with it? If he didn't have any felonious record prior to that, he wasn't in the state prior to that, how is it that 20 years later he's still here if he didn't have anything to do with this?
Well, it's a cover-up, plain and simple. It's a cover-up. And now, I mean, I've made complaints over the years, and I know for a fact that my complaints reached the eyes and ears of Justice Department officials in Washington, D.C., and they sent a special prosecutor to investigate this matter, and the result was the indictment of Chad Scott.
And I'm looking at, just going through my notes again, I mean, other guys, I mean, just the names of people who have walked back their comments. There's Randy Lewis as well.
Right.
How do you feel about the prospect of getting out of here?
Well, I just want to get out and move forward with my life, like every other wrongfully convicted. I'm not mad at anybody. Like I said, everybody has a path in life. This was mine. Still living, still young, still healthy. Want to get out and see my kids and my grandkids and move forward.
When you say everybody has a path in life, this is mine, what do you mean by that? What is your path?
Well, I would tell the world that I saw what Peter and Paul saw in the Bible, you know. They were prisoners. I seen what they saw, you know. That was their path. This is my path. It's life, you know. It's what I was faced with. It's what I was born for, you know, to tell my story, to try to encourage the youth to, you know, whatever happens in life, just keep believing in God, and you know, He'll make a way for you. He'll make a way.
Is there anything else, sir, you want to talk about just regarding this case? I've got a few other points to discuss, but I mean, I just want to take a second to just pause and if there's anything that you would like to address before we continue.
Well, I just think that the Texas legislature needs to address the issue of how habeas appeals are handled, because there's a lot of people I've ran across, dozens of people who have important matters that need to be, you know, constitutional issues that are not being recognized. Everything's being rubber stamped. It's like a organized organized slavery, you know. It's heartbreaking. It's something to deal with. I just keep my faith in God. You know, everybody got a path. I think God gonna lead me out of this. I got to put Him first. That's about it.
Your family's been really active too in trying to keep this case out there.
Sure. Yeah, they've been. My son. I had a son. When I left, he was 10 years old. So we formed a relationship from inside here, and I used to have him doing a lot of legal research for me, and he fell in love with the law. He's an attorney now. He works for a federal judge in Dallas. So I'm really proud of him, Lamar Jr. So, you know, my family's been, my dad, my friends, supporters, you know, everybody's been behind me. We held protests during my last court appearance back in 2009 to raise this issue. I mean, it's just one of those cases, you know. It's just one of those cases. Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So we went through this pretty quickly. Yeah, I mean, we talked about the perjury, obstruction of justice, falsifying records. You know, actually, I'll just ask you just more, you know, directly about that. I mean, Scott himself indicted in 2017 on a slew of charges. There's perjury, obstruction of justice, falsifying records, and a federal investigation. When someone looks at you and says, hey, well, if ultimately this guy had a role at least in investigating the murder of Early Perry, how is it that the allegations against him for which he has been charged apply to shedding light on your situation?
Well, I think that's where you come in at, Brandon. I think that's what the First Amendment gives us, the right to bring it to the public. And once the public sees it, it's, you know, the covers are off of it. What is this guy still doing in prison? This agent is under indictment. We've got him over here. He's done this to people over a 20-year period. This guy needs to be out of prison. Until you came along, you were the first. Until you came along, nobody knew about it. Now, the entire state and hopefully the world will see what this guy did, and he will never be able to do this to another person.
All right, Mr. Burks, I think that pretty much does it for me. I think we've gone over everything. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on you think we didn't address?
No, that's about it. That's about it.
So, and then I'll ask you, as you put it, you did nothing wrong. This is a question that I'm sure you've heard before. How does it feel to be here?
I mean, it's prison. I mean, there were those that came before me, and there are those that will come after me. You know, it's about keeping a strong mind while here, doing something to occupy your time, something positive. Don't join gangs. Read a lot. See what's really going on in the world. And most importantly, keep God in your heart. Put God first, and He will show you the way. He will give you all the knowledge that you need to free yourself from prison. That's the only thing I can offer. I mean, that's the most important thing, is keep God first.
Is that a message that you spread here to other guys?
Daily. Daily. I mean, in prison, I come out every morning, come into what we call the day room, and open my Bible, and that's how I start my day out. You know, I feel like the day will be totally different if you started out with the Word of God.
Any particular verse or passage that?
All of it is power. Each and every word of it is power. Each and every word.
Mr. Burks, I won't hold you any longer than I have, unless there's anything else you want to talk about.
No, that's about it. That's about it, Mr. Walker. Just let's get this message out to the world. Let's get my message out to the world. Show the world who Chad Scott is. Show the world the evidence that was used to convict me. Show the world. Show it to the world, and let them condemn those responsible. Let them condemn those responsible.
John, you think there's something?
Can I get a couple behind shots and then a reverse if you've got a question or two?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
sure.
I went with this, and it's got some great shots from here about the second half.
Okay,
So,
okay.
anyway, I got some there. I just need a little bit here.
We
Where
got close to 30 minutes.
We got 30 minutes left,
Hey, Brian,
okay.
can I get you to slide
It's all
over
right.
this way now?
So-
I'm gonna cheat it.
Okay.
Thank you. That's good.
All right, so we'll just chat for a little bit. We're going to get just a couple more
This
shots
I just
of
need
the.
you talking, Brandon. Then, you
Okay.
know, a little bit of
How long you
him.
been doing this, Mr. Walker?
All together, so that may be let's see, at Channel 2, KPRC for 5 years, altogether on air as a reporter, not long, about 11. I started, though, when I was in high school at a station in New Orleans, where I'm from, behind the scenes. So I think I've worked in the business now longer than I've been alive. I have, yeah, because I was 15 when I started.
So you're from New Orleans.
I am.
You got any buddies down there that are going to be covering the Scott trial next week?
That I don't. I've got to imagine, because if not, I mean, I'm talking to our guys about seeing if I can go. For us, I don't know if we'll get a yes or a no, but I mean, it's such a. There's so many local cases from the time here in Houston. We could benefit from being there just to see where things are going.
To catch him coming in and out of that courtroom, that would amplify this case.
Mm-hmm.
That would amplify my plight. To catch him, to let the world see him. To let the world see him walking in and out of that courtroom, knowing that, showing the world that he was a part of this 20 years ago, that would really do this case some justice.
What would you tell him if you could tell him something?
I seen a photograph of when he was in court, and I think he had a son. I think his son was in court with him. I think I would tell him that I never got that opportunity to raise my son, you know. I mean, I don't know where his heart is, so.
Okay. Oh, I can wait.
No, that's good. I'm done. I was going to switch around to the other side.
Okay. I saw you doing that. That's why I didn't want to stop.
So this is just on him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to move out of the way again because I just want to just have you addressing that without my head in the way.
Okay, go for it.
So if you could speak to him, what would you say?
Well, I would.
You mentioned you saw a picture.
Yeah, I saw a picture of Chad Scott in court with his son, and I would just tell him that, you know, freedom is precious. You know, if you are able to make it out of that trial with a small amount of jail time, a small sentence, you know, repent for what you've done and raise your kids. You know, I never got that. My kids are grown now, you know, almost 30. I would tell him just look into your son's eyes, you know, because he's only going to be that age once, you know. Do the right thing.
Do you forgive him?
Of course. Of course. I forgive him. I forgive him for what he's done. I don't have a bad vibe in my heart. I think it's God's wrath upon him right now for what he's done. He's ruined a lot of families. A lot of families. So.
Thank you. All right, John, you can
Let's spin
we'll
around
go back
and get a shot
to
there.
the cutaway. Curious that it hasn't been scheduled in a docket yet, because just the evidence alone to make the claim, I think, shows that there is an opportunity to have another argument. And that,
like I say, the district attorney hasn't responded to the new evidence. They've just, you know, they only made a comment in a Chronicle article, and that was when we first filed, before all of the evidence was on the record. You know, they made a comment about they stand by their witness or something like that.
mm-hmm. And now he's on. So I'm just going to ask you again. So describe your day, June 30th, 1997.
Well, that day I wasn't even in the state of Texas. Phone records that were subpoenaed by Mr. DeGuerin show I was en route to my family's hometown of Opelousas, Louisiana. Lake Charles, Louisiana. I made a collect call, stopped at the casino, did a little gambling, went on down there and stayed all week with my family. Attended the wedding, came on back. That evidence never got out because my attorney walked off the case.
Okay, you.
Yeah, he doesn't have to answer all.
Okay, yeah.
Just-
So I'm gonna just do another one, and you don't even have to answer the full responses since we got them earlier. I'm just gonna fire them off, and then they'll match them from there. Then I'll ask you, did you know Early Perry?
Never met the guy a day in my life. You know, I feel for his family, what they've been through, but the truth is coming out.
For people, what was your? We'll go back to former Agent Scott. Had you any interaction with Chad Scott, or had you known about him prior to your case?
Prior to the indictment,
Yes.
I just heard his name in the streets. It's like a legend, a myth. He was running around in the Fifth Ward, terrorizing, you know, and it was like, if you ever run into him, you know, don't cross him, or don't cross anybody that's working for him, because, you know, you end up either dead or in jail.
And I'm just going to ask one more, John, and that's the one that we asked earlier, just about, you know, for folks who may not be familiar with this, after a trial, 2 failed appeals, and still trying to get the case going, if ultimately you didn't do it, why are you still here?
Well, I think that's a question for the Harris County District Attorney. They haven't addressed any of the evidence that's on the record, that's before the court. I'm hoping that they will answer soon and do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the question for them. We've played our hand. Now it's time for them to play theirs.
Yeah. I mean, again, I do. You know, just in reading the casework, I've covered a fair share of trials, and I do a fair amount of court reporting now at Channel 2, and I've covered other cases with less evidence that have been granted at least the court date.
with less evidence.
Yeah. So I will say that I'm curious about that.
Well, as I said, you know, I think it's liability.
Mhm.
I think the county, you know, Ms. Ogg has done a lot of good since she's been district attorney. And I think that, you know, she may not want to overdo it, make it look like she's